Okay, Amanda Copeland, I think we're connected to Facebook Live. Thank you so much for joining us on our Marcy's Law interview series, Why We Do What We Do. Thank you also in advance for supporting Marcy's Law. We're going to be on the ballot in the fall, and we've been in Tennessee for a long time talking with stakeholders and people for whom Marcy's Law and the meaningful, enforceable constitutional rights for victims are important, like you and your family, and survivors all over Tennessee and really all over America and the states that we've passed. So thank you so much for your ongoing support. We love partnering with the people of Tennessee and look forward to staying in close contact even after the fall. Now, I first want to talk to you a little bit about your daughter, Savannah Grace, which is what brings us here today, tragically. Savannah was a 13-year-old cheerleader at Powell Middle School, and that's in Knox County, Tennessee, right?
Yes.
And we on Marcy's Law, Why We Do What We Do interviews, we started this a little over 5 years ago, and we wanted to highlight the people around the country who are advocates for victims' rights and for survivors, especially during times of grief and times where they have to navigate the criminal justice system, which, as you and I talked about, is a very, very intimidating system to navigate, especially for people who had never been there before. Um, and I will say that I have seen so many incredible, inspirational people and inspirational stories. And as you and I have gotten to know each other, um, you are about as top of that list as anyone can be.
Thank
Um,
you.
we talk about we talk about families and people that turn that turn just profound tragedy into um, purposeful moving forward in your lives and in the community. And I saw a quote from uh, I'm always quoting different sources, and I'm a sucker for a good quote. And I saw a quote from a playwright, Eugene O'Neill, that said, "Tragedy brings an urge toward life and even more life." And I thought of you and all the conversations that you and I have had coming up to today, the incredible journey that you've been on that started with the most unthinkable, unimaginable tragedy, um, with the murder of your daughter on October 22nd of 2024. Before we get into that horrific day, I want you to tell me about Savannah. And I want you to remember you were telling me about the Love Lives On luncheon. And I want to talk about that at some point. But it happened last weekend, and you were saying that so many times people don't want to talk to you or ask you about Savannah because they get nervous, they get uncomfortable about it. But you
Yeah.
love to talk about her. So I
Yes.
want to start by you talking about Savannah. To tell us about Savannah.
Savannah, like you said, 13 years old. She was a cheerleader. Savannah was like the best way to describe her is Savannah was unapologetically Savannah. She was like what you saw is what you got from her. She was an advanced art student. She loved art, any form of art. She was a good student. She was an athlete. She was a cheerleader on two different cheer teams. She did martial arts. She did gymnastics. She did tumbling to just make her a better cheerleader. She loved tumbling. I swear she lived her life upside down more than right side up. And then she was one of those people that you knew exactly where you stood with Savannah. If she liked you and was chill with you, you knew that. If she didn't like you, you knew that too. She wasn't mean, but she wasn't going to pretend to be a friend and then be like, I don't like that person. But she was a fierce friend to the ones that she was close with. She didn't have a large friend network. She kind of kept it pretty close in and pretty tight knit. And, but she was the type of friend that had your back even when you weren't there. She was funny without trying to be funny. She was like her dad. She was very introverted, and so she only really spoke when she decided she had something to say. So sometimes it came out and it was funny, and she was like, "I don't even know why you're laughing." And I was like, "You're funny, but you don't try to be funny." Like her brothers are always being goofy and being boys, and she was just that quiet, understated kiddo, until you made her mad, and there that's when you see me come out of her with the sarcasm and attitude and quick to defend herself when she needed to. So she stood up to her brothers when she had to.
And she was a twin, right? And the
Yes,
only girl,
she is the only girl. Yeah.
and she has a twin brother and an older brother.
Yes. Yes.
And
However, she was 12 minutes older, so she was the big sister, and she made sure he always remembered that.
yeah. And she loved the color blue. I wore blue today because of her.
Yes,
Um,
light
I
blue was her favorite.
and I tried to
We
find the lightest, brightest blue I could, because you were telling me about that, and she loved butterflies and bees, and we're going to get into that a little bit
animals in general.
later.
I have a video because I went back right after she was killed. I went back through our Ring camera and downloaded like every video that she was in, and I come across one and she's bent down on the walkway, and her brother and her boyfriend AJ would ride the bus home with her in the afternoons, and they came up behind her and was like, "What are you doing?" It was a beetle that was on the walkway, and she was trying to move it off the walkway before anyone stepped on it. So really any animal in general, but she was particularly passionate about the bees and the butterflies.
And she was also an artist too.
Yes, yes, advanced art student, and she loved like any type of art that you put in front of her. She would paint it, she would draw it, she would color it, she would there was a couple of times where she went to birthday parties and it was like a pottery class. She would like it didn't matter. She did it.
And I'm here in Boston, where New England Patriots fans, and we love Tom Brady. And Peyton Manning obviously is a UT guy,
Yeah.
but who was one of Tom Brady's big rivals. But you were telling me that Savannah wanted to be a cheerleader at University of Tennessee,
Yes, that was
which is
her.
near your house, right?
Yes, yeah, we live in Knoxville, so game day is a big deal around here. You either go to the game or you stay home to avoid the traffic from the game. So, but yes, that was her. She really grew in her confidence and found kind of herself in cheer and gymnastics. Like that's where she really learned to shine. And I would always tease her and tell her she was the uncheeriest cheerleader ever, because any other time she's like in black and her hair's down and she had like the full curly hair, and but the second she would put her cheer uniform on, like the smile would come on and she would get out there and she would cheer her heart out. And for the most part, she never really liked to be the center of attention, but there was a couple times where she started the cheers and stuff and she was like, that's kind of fun. So that's where she just would really shine.
And let me ask you about that day in October, when you were concerned that she wasn't getting up for school, October 22nd of 2024. Tell us about that morning.
Um, I always had to get up earlier than them because have a whole lot more to do, and then I had to do all the things for them to get them ready for school. Because Savannah would always eat a pretty protein packed breakfast, so I would have to go and fix her eggs and do all the things. So I would get up early, get some of my things done, and the bathroom. I was always in the bathroom. The bathroom wall it was the wall shared between the bathroom and her bedroom. She always had to get up earlier than her brother because she was what I would call a dawdler. She That's what I called her. I was like, you always dawdle, so you have to get up earlier. And so her alarm always went off at 6:30, and she had an Alexa cuz music was like her favorite thing. So Alexa was her alarm. And I heard her alarm going off, and it just kept going off and kept going off, and I was like, that's weird. I was like, what is happening? And so I go out of the bathroom and I'm knocking on her bedroom door, and it was locked. And I was like, so I just kept, I first off I yelled, Alexa, stop, because it was still playing. And she wasn't answering, and I was like, oh my gosh, like, is she in there and sick? What's going on? And so I went and I grabbed a butter knife out of the kitchen, and I just heard her knob was easy to unlock, and I opened the door and she was not in there. And I thought, well, maybe she got up and maybe she went downstairs and got her stuff and accidentally locked the door behind her. And so I go downstairs and I'm calling for her. And at this point, Casey, her twin brother, heard, and he got up and he's like, what's happening? And I'm like, I don't know where your sister is. And I even went out back. I was like, maybe she's out back on the deck. Maybe she, like, whatever. So I looked everywhere and I was like, she's not here. So I grabbed my phone and I looked. We have Live 360, and I look and it showed that she had left the house the night before, right around midnight, and that she was not home. And so the first call I made was to my husband, who had already left for work. I called him and I was like, Savannah's not here. She's not in the house. Casey and I got in the van because we started driving to where, it showed that she was. Of course, it's dark, and I'm like driving up the road, and I looked at Casey. I was like, this is crazy. I was like, we're not gonna be able to find her. It's dark. I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. So I turned around, went back, and I pulled into a restaurant parking lot that was nearby, and I called 911. And from there, they told me to go back home because they would be sending officers out. So they sent police officers out to start looking for her. They asked me some questions, got descriptions, saw a picture. They went out looking. About an hour later, I guess, I got a call where they were going to send out some detectives because she had not been found. And they sent out juvenile detectives and did the same thing, gave the description, showed them her room, showed them Life 360, all the things. And they were like, where would she go? And I was like, literally nowhere. The kid is afraid of everything. She's terrible with directions. She has horrible anxiety. She wouldn't go anywhere. Like, I don't know. If I knew, I'd tell you, I don't know where she'd go. I would have never in a million years thought she'd leave. And so they go out and they're looking, and all day long, like, my husband drove home, he went out looking. My oldest son came home. He was out looking with Casey. My mom went out. Everybody's out looking, and I just stayed put at home thinking, if she comes home, I need to be here. And I sat at home and I sat outside because in my head, if I'm outside, I see her faster, and stuff. And so I'm out there just hanging out, and this went all day long. And finally, it was starting to get dark. I was actually out back on the back deck at the time, and I saw law enforcement pulling up to the house. And in my head, the only option that there was, the absolute only option, is that she was coming home. We had heard a lot of police sirens. My son had actually seen them going, and he came home and he was like, man, there's like a ton of police going down towards Clinton Highway. And I was like, oh, I wonder what happened. Never it never occurred to me that it would have anything to do with Savannah, because she was coming home. That was it. And then one of the detectives, I knew from when I was a victim advocate with a sexual assault center, and I worked out of the family justice center. And so when the detective walked up that I knew, I like ran to him and I hugged him and I was like, oh my gosh, thank goodness you're here. And it's someone I know. And he was like, oh gosh, he was like, let's go inside. And I was like, that's that's probably not good. I'm still trying to, like, she's coming home. Why isn't she in your car? Why aren't you getting her out? And so he walked in with me and my husband and asked the kids and everyone else to stay outside, and he told me that Savannah had passed.
And you since found out, and we're not going to get into the case itself, but you since found out that she had been stabbed.
Yes. I found out they would not tell me that night what had happened to her because of course it's still a very new investigation. I don't even remember. Of course, it's really hard because, of course, I fell apart, and so remembering any details from then on was is fuzzy at best. But the same detective, came back just, I think it was a few hours later. It seemed like he was like right back, but I know it had been some time. And he told us that they had arrested the person that was responsible, and he told us the name, and we knew that person, and he said there'll be a bond hearing in the morning if you want to be there. You don't have to be there, but if you want to, it'll be at 9 o'clock in the morning, or eight. I think it was 8:30. And at first I was like, I'm not going to that. And then I sat there and I was like, oh no. I was like, you know what? I have to go. I have to go and be there for her. Like she can't be there. So I have to go and I have to be her voice. And so the very next morning we were in court, and actually the assistant district attorney called me before we went down there, and she was the one that told me that Savannah had been stabbed to death.
And as it turned out, it it was um, it was a pretty gruesome stabbing.
uh
And
over 93 over 93 times. And the only reason that they don't have an exact number, the medical examiner stated that so many of them were overlapping that she only counted it as one, but it could have been one, it could have been five, it could have been 10. So the conservative estimate is 93 times.
and as a surviving mom and a surviving member of Savannah's family, you talked about how important it was for you to be her voice.
Yes.
And you also talked about um, the blessing that you were um, assisted by people that you knew in
Yes.
the system. You had been a victim witness advocate. Victim witness advocates are so important to the process, and you actually have were a victim witness advocate. Uh,
Yes. Well, I was a victim advocate for the sexual assault center, but I worked with the DA's office and all the folks over there, and those victim witness advocates, and the DAs, the ADAs that were prosecuting cases, and I worked with a lot of the law enforcement as well. So it was almost a blessing and a curse that I knew what to anticipate, because I know how long it takes to get through these things. But having those friends and knowing, like, I had the comfort in knowing that my daughter and her case was in really good hands because of that.
yes, and so on a couple of different levels, you now knew how important it was to be supported.
Yes.
And thank God you had the support that you did. Um, and one of the things that was really amazing, the more I got to know about you and your family in the case, was the incredible outpouring of the community. And you talked to me about the community outpouring and how you were just blown away by it,
Yes.
by the church and the community, and you and your family wanted to do something to give back to that community. And so there are a few different things that I wanted you to touch on. One being the Savannah Grace Foundation, the other being the Savannah Grace Act, which is another piece of Savannah's legacy, which will help children's advocacy centers all across Tennessee, which is just absolutely fantastic. Um, but the Savannah Grace Foundation in particular, could you tell us a little bit about the three things that the Savannah Grace Foundation is going to try to help support?
Yeah, yeah. It was like almost overwhelming, the amount of support, like the blue lights, the letters, the notes, the people, like her funeral itself. I don't even know how many were there. It was a packed house, put it that way. And multiple law enforcement were there that I had worked with, all the way up to like I think he was our deputy chief at the time. Bernie Lyons came. It was just phenomenal, the support that I got from law enforcement, the DA's office, and the community as a whole. And so when some of the grief fog cleared, I looked at my husband. I was like, how in the world do we pay these people back? Like, how in the world do we show how much we love and appreciate all of these folks who just really went above and beyond, to be honest, to just make sure that we were supported and loved, and continue to do so here 18 months later. And so we were like, let's start a foundation. And I was like, well, I want to start a foundation. I don't want to reinvent the wheel. Like everybody starts a foundation. I was like, I want it to really like be something that we make the community better in her honor, like build a legacy for her and just leave it a better place. And so the first thing that we absolutely knew that we were going to do is help the two cheer teams that she was on and just make sure that any girl like Savannah, who may not be your normal stereotypical cheerleader, but really wants to do it, is able to do it without having to worry about financial obligations. She was when she was, she was like, it's a really expensive sport. And I was like, everything you do is expensive. Like that's a me problem. You don't worry about it.
Yeah.
I was like, we don't let money get in our way of chasing dreams. And so I wanted to make sure that other girls got those same opportunities. So that was our very first thing that we started working on. And we eventually want that to expand to where any kiddo in Knox County schools, if they, want to be in an art club, or if they want to be playing football, the football team was an amazing support system for her twin brother. Like he played football, she cheered. Like the football moms and the cheer moms are phenomenal showing support. But we want to make sure that any kiddo, like those extracurricular things are so important just to build socialization and friendship and all the things that the coaches pour into these kiddos and stuff. So that's our one, we call them our pillars. That's one pillar.
And before you get into the second pillar, um, they're expensive.
So expensive. Yes.
I mean, for parents, and you and I talked about this. I talked about with my three sons as well, for these travel teams and these sports teams. And you were
Yes.
saying to cheer,
To cheer,
for Powell is $1,500,
roughly
and if you
$1,500.
want to go to nationals, you said it's like 3,500.
So they are a competition cheer team. And so if they get a bid to nationals is in Disney World. That's expensive. And yes, it gets up to like $3,000, $3,500, which can be, quite a burden on a family if they want their kid to go. And so we wanted to make sure that we were able to bridge those gaps
So these
when.
scholarships from the foundation are gonna go to try to help kids
Mhm.
be able to afford cheer.
Yeah, we were actually able to just this year. They got a bid for nationals and they were going in February. And a parent reached out to the coach and was like, hey, we're running just a little bit short of our last payment of 500. And the Savannah Grace Foundation stepped in and paid it. And it just so happened that the cheerleader that we helped was one of Savannah's, like, she loved this cheerleader. This cheerleader was younger than her, grade younger, but they bonded over being able to tumble and stuff, and she just adored her. And so it just made my heart so happy that she was our first one that we got to help. So it was such an honor.
It's beautiful, and to show how grassroots this is. Um, I was blown away by the story when you told me that at the Powell Middle School, the band actually had a penny wars competition, and they
Yes.
raised $1,000 in pennies for the
Yes.
Savannah Grace Foundation.
Yes. And they had so much fun doing it. Penny Wars is like each teacher puts a jar outside their room and you put pennies in. So pennies count as points and you want as many of those as you can get. But silver, so nickels, dimes, and quarters, take that many points away. So if you put a quarter in, it takes 25 points away from it. So they get real strategic. And when they see other classes like inching closer to like the teacher that they want to win or whatever, they'll go and throw a handful of quarters in their jars to like set them back and stuff. So and then the winners, the classrooms that were the winners for sixth, seventh, and eighth, there was a winner for each grade, and the Savannah Grace Foundation provided donuts for those classes that won.
That's
Yeah.
fantastic. And then and tell us about the other two pillars of the foundation.
So the other pillar is retreats for families and siblings. We were really, really grateful that other families who had been through this reached out to us. And one of those families was the Baileys, Tristan Bailey's family down in Florida. And they reached out to us. And one of the first conversations we had with them was like, you know, it's really hard on your marriage and it can be really hard on the siblings. Like suicide rates for siblings reach levels of like veterans, and it just puts such a strain on a marriage. And so we were like, gosh, how do we navigate that? And then when we got to the point where we're like, okay, now what are we doing? Grief retreats was one of the things that we really, really wanted to do. We actually, one of her cheer coaches just ran in Disney World for experience camps, which does provide grief camps for kids who have lost a sibling or a parent. So we were able to raise $2,500. So sent one kiddo to camp for a week. Locally, we have Magnolia Harbor Care Farm, which is a phenomenal place with phenomenal people. And they do grief support groups, grief retreats, all the things. They're actually going to be helping us out with the cheerleaders here in just a couple weeks and providing a day for these cheer teams who have been through a lot. And they're just phenomenal. So we're going to kind of partner with them and make sure that we are supporting families that are going through these same things as much as we possibly can, including siblings.
And that's coming up on May 16th.
Yes, for the cheerleaders, yes. Yeah.
And then the third pillar.
That one is where the Savannah Grace Copeland Act kind of comes in. You know, you have to sit and acknowledge that mental health has to be part of it here. And I'm always like, if he was in therapy, if he was in, would that have made a difference? And being in the social work and victim advocacy and mental health world like I am, you learn about adverse childhood experiences and all these things. And so our third pillar is advocating for greater access to mental health services and trying to bring some of that education and stuff to the community. And we're gonna partner with Joy Gardner a little bit with that. She is an advanced grief recovery specialist here in Powell, but mine and her goal is to see kind of Powell Church, our church, become like the center hub to provide some of those classes. Mental health first aid, suicide prevention things, adverse childhood experiences. Just bring that education out to the parents and the teachers who are trying to support these kiddos. The act, so Representative Michelle Carringer actually did a resolution for Savannah pretty early on. And media, of course, reached out to my husband and wanted a comment about, what do you think about the resolution? And he was like, the resolution is amazing. And it's a resolution that's now in, Tennessee books, and it belongs to Savannah, but it's largely symbolic. And so my husband was like, we really appreciate it and we're grateful, but what we really would like to see is, if you want to honor our daughter, let's talk about greater access to mental health care. So Michelle Carringer was working with former Representative Eddie Smith on a bill to increase funding for the child advocacy centers across the state of Tennessee. And so they reached out to me and asked how I felt about them naming it after Savannah. And they sent the bill to me, and my husband and I looked it over, and it was a substantial funding increase starting in July of this year, because July starts their fiscal year. And then after that, it has an annual increase built in. So every year they will get an increase in funding. And so it kind of helps their funding long term, not just this one time thing. And it's going to increase funding for all 32 child advocacy centers across the state of Tennessee. And those advocacy centers, if you're not familiar with them, law enforcement and child services use those. They have trained professionals in there to do forensic interviews with kiddos who have been abused, so that they don't have to go and sit in a courtroom and testify and things like that. So it's amazing. It's an amazing resource and thing that they do. But they also provide clinical services, therapy services to those kiddos. And normally it's free because they're grant funded. So these kiddos have been through the worst of the worst, and they come in there and they have a safe place to tell their story, and then they have someone to help them process that and get past their trauma. And so it will um be able to help them increase that, more therapists, more services, more things. They had not, the child advocacy centers had not had a funding increase since the 1990s. And we all know a dollar in the 1990s is not the same as a dollar in 2026. And so we, it I was like, that's we're doing more work. They're doing more work with more kids in these child advocacy centers. And I got to work with them quite a bit at the sexual assault center because we did ages 13 and up. And so whenever we could, we would do those forensic interviews at some of the area child advocacy centers. So I got to see a lot of them and just see their hearts. So I'm so glad that they're going to be able to expand those services and have the funding because they're doing amazing work.
The work that they do is absolutely incredible.
Yeah.
It's and as a prosecutor, it's as a former prosecutor who used to do these cases, it really makes such a huge difference for the abused, for the victims and the survivors and their families because they don't have to tell the story in so many different ways
Over and over and over again.
over and over and before they and inevitably if the case goes to trial they're going to have to tell it one more time at the stand so on the stand so you want to try to limit the amount of times they have to go through that and get re-traumatized every single time. In fact, I was at I've been on the board of the Children's Advocacy Center in Boston for almost 20 years now, and I was actually at an event for them last night, thinking about the Savannah Grace Act and the great work that does, not just for one children's advocacy center, but all 32 in Tennessee, which is absolutely huge. Um, and when you talked about your husband, Michael,
Yes.
um, a while ago, and he did something really special with the community. And I think it was in the area where Savannah was killed. Tell us
Yes.
about what he did with the help of people in the community. Um, and I know a pastor built a beautiful blue cross.
The
And
pastor's husband, yes. Yeah,
yeah,
so, I went to I don't know what made me think of her. Her husband and her kids are so crafty, and they build things, and they're so handy, and so I asked if she would be willing to, ask her husband to build me a cross to place out where this thing happened, and so she did, and we went out there, and the day we went out there, we were joined by, again, members of law enforcement came out there with us to help us place that cross. Like, again, just the support was amazing. Community members, church friends, like, they came out and helped us. And we all said something that, how we will remember Savannah, and we put the cross up. And I had gone out there so many times, and I still go out there. And what really really bothered me is I would go out there, and this cross was gorgeous, and I would stand there and I would stare at the dirt, and I would think, that's the dirt that my daughter died in. She laid there and died, and it bothered me so much. And I came home one day, and he probably thought I was nuts, and I was like, I hate the dirt. And he was like, I'm sorry, what? And I was like, I hate the dirt. I said, when I go out there, I look at the dirt, I hate the dirt. All I do is think about how she died in the dirt, and I hate it. I was like, can you please do something? And he was like, yeah, yeah. He works at Site One. He's an agronomics manager out at Site One, which is a landscaping supply company. And so he was like, I think we can, like, put down flagstone and make it really pretty. And I was like, okay. And so he got some friends that he knew from Site One, and they donated their time, they've donated their tools, they've donated the materials, and they've gone out there, and the day before they were going to go do it, again, my husband probably was like, what is she doing to me? I was like, I want the dirt. And he was like, what? And I was like, I want it. I was like, it's the last dirt that my child was on. I was like, so before you go out there and lay a bunch of stone covering it up so that I don't have to picture her in the dirt, I said, I want it. And so he went out there and he scraped it up and put it in buckets and brought it home. And out in the front, we have kind of a memorial garden for her. It has a flag with her photo and stuff. That is where that dirt is. And that is where we plant the butterfly bushes. And that's where we have a little bird bath area that the butterflies and the bees can come get drinks of water. And that's her butterfly garden out there, essentially, in the front of the house. But out at the cross, it grew. And so it was flagstone put down, and then it was benches that were built. And then they scraped up, like, it's just a wooded area, but they went out there and they scraped up all of it, and they're planting all kinds of shades of blue out there and things that again will draw the butterflies and things like that. Him and some of his friends went out recently because the walkway to get down there was really, really muddy whenever it rains. And so again, they came out donating their time and their materials and made a gravel walkway so that when we go out there, we're not walking in the mud all the way down there. And then every year at the Community Day of Grace, we have kiddos paint rocks because she was painting rocks at the time when she was killed. And then we take those rocks and I go put them out there in that gravel walkway. And so there's these little painted rocks all the way down there. And we go out and we decorate out there for the holidays. And it's just become a place of, reflection and grace and beauty. And so that's what we turned it into. And I know a couple of friends that live in that neighborhood, they walk their dog down there, and they said every time they get down there, their dogs will just sit and like be chill. Like they get to that spot and it's just where this horrible thing happened. We can go down there and it's extremely peaceful down there for us now. Like we can sit there and just think about her and think about how our life changed and things like that down there. It's just a really great place of reflection.
Yeah, and it really embodies. I saw an interview with your husband where he talked about how it really kind of embodies the quality that she had. Like you said, she was very comfortable being quiet and being by
Yes.
herself, and having that quiet time. And and I saw on your website, by the way, which is savannahgracefoundation.org, where you can get involved in all these incredible things, including the scholarships. And there's also a really nice picture of the benches and the garden that you just talked about, as well as a C.S. Lewis quote where it reminds me of when you're thinking and you're reflecting, and the dogs are there, and there's so much peace. A C.S. Lewis quote from Grief Observed, which says, "Her absence is like the sky spread over everything." And I thought of all the different stories you've been telling me about Savannah. And in that interview with Michael, your husband, he talked about the community outpouring, and he talked about it in terms of light. He said it was like beautiful light, and he said just like any other time when it's dark, that's when you really see the light. And he said, and we were in a very dark place, and the
Yeah.
light seemed so much brighter, and it
Yeah.
was so beautiful, and it really embodied everything that you have talked to me about your experience and how you've turned this into something positive, not just for your family but for the whole community that you felt so indebted to, that
Yes.
lifted you up. um, and so the last thing I wanted to talk about with the different ways that you're remembering, and you just touched on it, is the Community Day of Grace,
Yes.
which is you've had the first one,
We
and
did
you're
the first.
having it purposely on October 22nd, on the day that Savannah was murdered, because you want people to talk and have fun on that day from now on.
Yeah.
So tell us about the first one, and what you want to do in the Community Days of Grace.
Oh goodness. So the first one, so we started, like really started the foundation, working on the foundation in September of last year. And so October 22nd was pretty quick. And I have an amazing board that helps me. One of them is one of her cheer coaches, and one of them is the lady that got on the news and started the blue lights for Savannah. And we met after she did that, and we have become such good friends. And we just they're just amazing. And so her cheer coach asked me, "What are you gonna do on the 22nd?" And I was like, hide in bed. I don't know yet. I was like, I don't know until I wake up on the 22nd. And she was like, she has a daughter who was on the cheer team with Savannah, was friends with Savannah. And she was like, they were talking, and she was like, I just really don't want to be home alone. I don't want to sit here alone. And so she was like, maybe we can do something. And so we talked about I think we threw the community day of grace together in like 3 weeks with 0 funds. So we really relied on, again, the grace of the community. So I'm reaching out. I'm like, "Hey, I need 500 hot dog buns. Can anyone come up with 500 hot dog buns?" And those cheer moms, listen, the cheer moms, sports moms, church ladies, like if you need something done, they're the folks to go to because they're like, "We've got you." And I had Bush Beans is actually local to here. They actually donated cans of baked beans to us for the day, and the fire department came out and the ambulance came out, and we had a fire for s'mores, and it was super simple. We grilled hot dogs, we played games. The football team was out there tossing the ball. Like it was a super simple day that we put together. We didn't know how many to expect. We ended up our estimate is somewhere around 300 came out that day. We were able to I actually announced the Savannah Grace Foundation for the first time at that particular event, and it just became it was so it gave me a purpose for that day. I didn't stay in bed. I was busy doing stuff for that. And we had face painting, and they would paint blue butterflies on people's faces. So there was a bunch of blue butterflies floating around, and we actually sold these shirts out there. And so a lot of blue shirts, a lot of Savannah's name. We had rock painting, so they were out there painting rock, and we actually had a banner stretched out there that said, "What does grace mean to you?" And we had people signing it saying, "What does grace mean to you?" And we will keep bringing that banner out and adding to it. So it was just such a special, precious time that we got to have with our community, and just be like, we just love them so much. We just love our community so much. And it was just a beautiful time that we had with them, just to be happy and not sit and be sad. Like to reflect on her life and not on her death, because her death isn't the important part.
Yeah, it really everyone should mark their calendar for next year, October 22nd, 2026, for this
Yeah.
coming fall. I'm sure it'll be absolutely incredible. You slapped together, like you said, in a matter of several weeks. So I can only
Yes.
imagine what you're going to do after you've had a little time to
Yeah.
organize. Um, but I'm glad people, thank you so much for spending so much time. And um, we could go on and on. I
Yeah.
really just wanted everyone to get a sense of your energy, which is so positive and so inspirational. And you and I have talked about this before. I can only think that it comes from Savannah through you, which is exactly what I think you want, whether you can help it or not.
I think
And
her brothers would disagree because they were like, she was kind of mean.
yeah, well, yeah, that's brothers, and especially the little brother too, even though it was only a
Yes.
matter of minutes. Now,
Yeah.
and we talked about how you turned that day, and all of a sudden, you've turned it into joy for so many
Yeah.
people. You've turned it into peace for so many people. You've turned it into laughter. People would be like, "How in the world could anybody do this?" And C.S. Lewis, who is so quotable, there's another. quote that I saw that I thought really, really was so relevant to you and all that you do, and all that you've done since that day. Um, and he says, you can't go back and change the beginning, but you can start where you are and change the ending,
Yeah,
which is what you do. And it's so amazing to watch and to see. Um, and I wanted to just end with something that I found so moving when you and I were talking over the last couple of weeks. And you talked about one of the prosecutors assigned to the case.
yes,
And you said something that really stuck with you. And it's probably something that now sticks with you every single day because it
absolutely
combines the
does.
hurt with the joy. And what was it that the prosecutor said? She said, when I got up this morning, I hurt all over. I hurt all over. But then what did she say?
She said, but I also thought about all the beautiful things Savannah is getting to see today in heaven. And she said this to me. I don't even know that she knows what a profound impact she made with just that one statement to me. She called me because she knew that we were going to see Savannah's body that day. So it was going to be the first time that I saw what happened to my child. And even then, like, I didn't have a clear picture because, again, Powell Chapel, again, amazing, amazing people, like phenomenal, like supported us, still support us to this day. They're just phenomenal. Um, they did a really great job with making Savannah look just like Savannah. And that she did. She looked just like Savannah. And so it was easy to look past a lot of it. So she knew I was going to see that. And I walked out of that room. I was so upset. And of course, this is like the last time I'm going to see my daughter, you know? And she called me, and it was just, I don't know, divine timing. I don't know. But she called me right after I walked out of that room, and that's what she said to me. And, at the time, I was like, I don't care what she's seeing in heaven. I just want her here with me. But that has stuck with me. And so, yes, I miss her so much. And I have really, really sad moments for her. Um, but I know that my sadness is mine. It's because I'm here and she's not. She's good. She is amazing. She is where all of us want to be. And I know that she is perfect. And I know that I will see her again. And so I am now at a point where I'm not counting how many days. I think of each day as one day close that she's been able to see.
Yeah. And we know that grief doesn't have a timeline. So
No.
every day is brand new. And if
Yeah.
you can keep that in your heart, that even though you do hurt all over, which I'm sure you do think of all the beautiful things that Savannah gets to see
Yes.
on
And she
that day.
reminds me. She reminds me. She
Well,
finds ways that I'm like, I know that's you.
I just want to thank you again, Amanda. You and I will continue to stay in touch. Please thank your husband, Michael, and your family. And we will stay in touch, and we will always make sure that we're here to support you in every single way that we can. Um, and um, and thank you again for being so generous with your time. And most importantly, happy Mother's Day.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
All right. Thanks, Amanda.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye bye.